What is storytelling? This is a question I have been wanting to ask my core audience for some time. There's a cliche that goes something along the lines of, with your art, make sure you're telling a story. But it's passed around in our circles without even really being understood or respected for what it might imply. Telling a story has always demanded much more of me than technical training ever had. The latter of which only takes blood, sweat, and tears, the former a sense of artistic purpose. This has always been difficult for me, and perhaps for other artists too. Maybe that's why it's so rare to see a final product that can actually shake us to a core and embolden us in our crafts. It is with this in mind, I am here to discuss Avatar: The Last Airbender. I hope you all get something special out of this. Avatar: The Last Airbender, a Nickelodeon animated series co-created by Mike Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, and shaped by writers Aaron and Elizabeth E. Has, aired from 2005 to 2008. In the decade that has passed since then, it has become something of a cult classic. But why? Perhaps all we can find is our own subjective interpretation, but this doesn't mean we should not examine the reasons why we received it the way we did. There is undeniably a symbolic landscape that can be uncovered from the very beginning. For this reason, I will be analyzing the opening to the first episode, and comparing and contrasting it with events from throughout the series. I hope by sufficiently answering the question, what does Avatar: The Last Airbender mean for myself, I may be able to pave the way for others to find their own meaning.
Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
Fading in from the darkness, 4 bending masters perform in rapid sequence on a theater stage, while a girl narrates the names of their respective elements. This final element is given significant attention, as it ends the cycle, calling attention to spiritual themes of enlightenment, symbolized by the inclusion of the monk and his whirlwind that causes the screen to flash with light.
My grandmother used to tell me stories about the old days, a time of peace, when the Avatar kept balance between the Water Tribes, Earth Kingdom, Fire Nation, and Air Nomads.
After the light fades, we see a map to this fantastical world. The camera descends to the very middle, through an ornamental frame that acts as a spiritual gateway. The narrator recalls the old days of peace, a time she had never experienced herself, but fantasies of which still filled her childhood. But her grandmother no longer tells her these stories, presuming she should have grown out of them. Despite what her grandmother thinks, our narrator continues recalling these stories to us, evidently finding them to be more than just stories, and something she still clings to in spite of her age. So, we descend into this legendary past as a statement that what we find beyond its spiritual gateway ought to be respected on its own terms, suspending our cynical disbelief. Passing through this gateway allows us to be gradually immersed by the text ourselves, further cemented by the transition from a 2-dimensional plane to 3, and the mountain range fading from mere illustrations on the map to literati paintings in parallax. At the top and bottom of this gateway scrawls calligraphy, translating into the phrases the powers are divided into 4, and all under heaven is guided by 1. The number 4 was established with the 4-element benders shown previously, but is now pointed out to us in relation to the 4 nations on the map. In pre-modern Chinese thought, everything is composed of an original universal energy, or qi. This qi splits into heavenly positive energy an earthly negative energy, an active form of energy, and a responsive form of energy, the latter of which is called yin, and the former yang. The four bending styles in the narrative can be viewed as the further divisions of these two energies. Fire and air involve yang and yin as they exist primordially, the former being purely an aggressive element, and the latter a purely defensive one. In contrast, water and earth involve the admixture of these two energies, with the former involving an ambivalent, responsive shifting between the two.
Waterbenders deal with the flow of energy. A waterbender lets their defense become their offense, turning their opponent's energy against them.
And the latter, a state of active neutrality.
I know! There's positive jing when you're attacking and negative jing when you're retreating.
And neutral jing when you do nothing.
The principle of one, or qi, can be regarded as pervading through the four elements, just as the avatar can be regarded as pervading through the four nations by their embrace of the human condition. The location of this descent acquires particular significance later in the narrative. This mountain range is the very same place that the lion turtle takes aim at summer's end, in other words, the fall equinox, which in itself is a reference to yin and yang, when the yang principle of day and the yin principle of night are in complete balance over the face of the earth.
But that all changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
The camera lands where the first attacks of the Fire Nation take place. Their flames are spreading across the world, engulfing everything in the Fire Lord and his military's co-prosperity sphere. The first people we clearly see are the Fire Navy men, which calls attention to how all people in living memory of the narrator are either involved in or somehow affected by the Fire Nation's imperialist war. Their skeletal masks evoke that while the Fire Nation justifies their expansion to the rest of the world as the price of prosperity, all the rest of the world sees is cruel, soulless inhumanity and death.
Growing up, we were taught that the Fire Nation was the greatest civilization in history, and somehow, the war was our way of sharing our greatness with the rest of the world. What an amazing lie that was.
Only the Avatar mastered all four elements. Only he could stop the ruthless firebenders. But when the world needed him most, he vanished.
Here we see the previous Avatar standing on the very mount that Aang will be brought to by the lion turtle at summer's end. He bends the elements in the same sequence as the silhouetted performers, as a demonstration of his full embrace of all four cultures. He vanishes in his final gust of air, symbolizing his reincarnation into the air nomads. With the Avatar gone, the Fire Nation usurps his role, relieving humanity of the burden of the spirit's place in the world, but via technology, rather than spiritual mastery.
100 years have passed, and the Fire Nation is nearing victory in the war.
As the narrator speaks of the erosion of harmony without the Avatar, we pan slowly from left to right. A devastated, lifeless landscape fills the shot, indicating that the people of the world have either burned to death or are forced to seek refuge elsewhere by the advance of the Fire Nation's empire of prosperity.
2 years ago, my father and the men of my tribe journeyed to the Earth Kingdom to help fight against the Fire Nation.
The ships leave, shrouded in darkness, their way forward only dimly lit by seal oil, just as their organic way of living is fading in the face of Fire Nation industrial violence. The images that came before communicated a fantastical war between the elements, but now the story has come down,
leaving me and my brother to look after our tribe.
To the domestic human level.
Some people believe that the Avatar was never reborn into the air nomads and that the cycle is broken, but I haven't lost hope.
This line finally points us to why the legend of the Avatar means so much to our narrator personally. The reality of their father leaving them for the war results in Katara feeling abandoned, just as the world has been abandoned by the Avatar for a legendary 100 years. Her hope that she'll see her father again, therefore gets tied up with the Avatar returning to restore balance. In her impoverished conditions, the only way to move forward is to look past them by placing all her hopes in some unseen and unconditioned future. She was as young then as Aang is when he came out of the iceberg, but the circumstances of war have forced her to grow up too fast. A repressed, childish desire for omnipotent parental protection lurks just below the surface. Displaced from her father onto the Avatar, Katara is simultaneously mature and thanklessly caring for the whole village, and childish in her expectations that someone will come to save her from her pain. To survive without her parents, Katara has had to tell herself that she is fully grown, suppressing any feeling of abandonment by treating her childhood as completely in the past. Because Aang was frozen in time, unaffected by the war up until this point, this allows him to recognize and draw out Katara's inner child.
I haven't done this since I was a kid.
You still are a kid.
We can see here that Katara distances herself from her own childlike enthusiasm by claiming that she enjoys it in nostalgia for her childhood, but Aang counters that she's still having fun like a child would, enjoying the moment for its own sake, and not for anything she could get out of it. In these subtle ways, Katara's development has been intimately affected and altered by the legendary conflict. While wars are started between nations, their violence is done to families, impacting how the next generation matures to adulthood. This is highlighted by Katara's age at the time of her father's departure. She was forced to take on the adult responsibilities of looking after their tribe 2 years ago when she was 12. The dynamics of human growth and maturation may be visualized by the yin-yang. Here, yin evokes unshaped potential, and yang, that which is shaped. The family we are brought up in provides the initial shape to our development as children, as symbolized by yang. However, a child's desire to be recognized for their development is impossible to fully satisfy within the context of the family of origin. This unshaped potential within their upbringing can be symbolized by the seed of yin that exists within yang. As much as family is necessary for a child's development, it is insufficient for completely growing up. For this reason, in adolescence, the child must leave the home that shaped them to enter the unshaped wilderness outside, symbolized by yin. There, and only there, they may freely form new intimate relationships with other children who have done the same, drawn together by the mutual recognition of the people they have each developed into. Through these friendships, shape is provided to their lives once more, as symbolized by the seed of yang within yin. This is the universal dance of human growth and development, which repeats from generation to generation, and from one society to the next. The water tribes have failed to actively shape the world together, and so they can only respond to the Fire Nation's aggression by fragmenting, both internally within each tribe, and between North and South with each other. This is reflected by the fragmentation of Katara's home, as Hakoda is separated from his children, in response to the ever louder call of war.
How could you leave us, Dad? I mean, I know we had Gran and she loved us, but we were just so lost without you.
I'm so sorry, Katara.
The Earth Kingdom is warped by a heedless desire to conserve the current shape of the world, desperately trying to ignore any foreign influence on or disruption of their traditions. This is reflected by Lao Beifong's over-assertion of his role in shaping his daughter Toph, stifling her need to develop by protecting her from any exposure to the potential dangers of the outside world.
I've let you have far too much freedom. From now on, you will be cared for and guarded 24 hours a day.
But Dad!
Dad.
We are doing this for your own good, Toph.
They are no longer welcome here.
I'm sorry, Toph.
I'm sorry too. Goodbye, Aang.
The Fire Nation is warped by a heedless desire to actively shape the world, tyrannically usurping power over it. This is reflected in Fire Lord Ozai's aggressive relationship with his father and his son. The murder of his own parent manifests his refusal to heed even the role of the one who shaped him in his desire to shape the world. As a paradoxical consequence, he also rejects his own role in shaping his son Zuko, demanding an intergenerational duel to the death.
Rise and fight, Prince Zuko.
I won't fight you.
You will learn respect, and suffering will be your teacher.
In this way, Ozai communicates that his son's life only retains shape in this world if he takes his father's.
You, my father, who banished me just for talking out of turn. My father, who challenged me, a 13-year-old boy, to an Agni Kai. How can you possibly justify a duel with a child?
The air nomad culture was entirely detached from their shape in the world, and so they could not respond to the Fire Nation's aggression, but instead lost their shape entirely. This is reflected by the complete loss of role in shaping Aang's life after his awakening.
Monk Gyatso and the other airbenders may be gone, but you still have a family. Sokka and I, we're your family now.
The war only allows for 4 kinds of parents in the lives of these children: absent, overprotective, sadistic, and dead. Children are left with no choice but to leave their family of origin, growing only by building new families with unfamiliar people who have yet been dealt a familiar fate.
Aang is the Avatar. He's the world's only chance. You both found him for a reason. Now your destinies are intertwined with his.
This recurring theme of the war's impact on families and the hope of their rebirth is evoked through the use of the song Safe Return, which is weaved throughout the narrative, playing at key moments. It first plays when Katara and Sokka flee from their home of origin.
How did you do that? With the water! It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen.
I don't know. I just sort of did it.
Why didn't you tell us you were the Avatar?
Because I never wanted to be.
While the Wild Tribe siblings discuss the journey ahead with Aang, the songs seem to contradict their circumstances. In what way are they returning home if they're leaving it behind? The lives of these two have become deeply intertwined with Aang's, and though they may not know it yet, by joining him on this journey, their broken family has been reborn in their friendship with him.
But Aang, the world's been waiting for the Avatar to return and finally put an end to this war.
And how am I going to do that?
And it is only by nurturing this friendship that Aang can grow and shape himself, becoming capable of fulfilling his duty as the Avatar by shaping the end of the war.
According to legend, you need to first master water, then earth, then fire, right?
That's what the monks told me.
Well, if we go to the North Pole, you can master waterbending.
We can learn it together.
Likewise, only through this friendship can the siblings' father safely return home as well, and their old family be reborn. However, in this first appearance, the song's initial melancholic notes are not fully developed, but instead interrupted by a tonal shift into the happy-go-lucky.
And Sokka, I'm sure you'll get to knock some firebender heads on the way.
I'd like that. I'd really like that.
Then we're in this together.
All right, but before I learn waterbending, we have some serious business to attend to.
The song does not resolve, as the process of rebirth for the Water Tribe siblings is not yet complete. Their bond has not yet been fully cemented from Aang's side, and cannot be until he returns to his home of origin, where he discovers what had happened there. Hence the song plays again when Aang discovers the genocide of his people. The home that shaped his childhood has been entirely lost.
You have indeed felt a great loss.
So his affection for those who raised him has to be reborn.
The air nomad's love for you has not left this world. It is still inside of your heart and is reborn in the form of new love.
This time, the song develops naturally to a final quiet note, as the process of rebirth has been completed. He must leave the air nomads behind as he joins a new home. The song plays again as the group leaves the dangers of the Fire Nation waters to return to the relative safety of the Earth Kingdom. At Avatar Roku's temple, Aang had learned how the cycles of heavenly events were manipulated by the Fire Nation to remove his people from the face of the earth, and what happened a century ago may soon be repeated on an even wider scale. Hence the horrific undertones added to this usually tranquil melody, pointing to the possibility of a reborn family, may now be undermined. As it plays, Aang silently isolates himself from the others. The siblings wordlessly close the distance, providing hope that they may overcome this unspeakable horror together. The song plays again when the baby that fell into the hands of wartime enemies is safely returned to his parents in a monastery by Aang, and not held captive by the victims of the Fire Nation occupation.
Oh, you're so cute!
Sure, he's cute now, but when he's older, he'll join the Fire Nation army. You won't think he's so cute then. He'll be a killer.
Far from family being destroyed by war in spite of its rebirth, the development of the next generation may be left undisturbed by war if this one fulfills the duty to them. For this brief moment, it is as if the war does not exist.
Tom!
The next use of the song occurs when Toph Beifong runs away from her parents' estate in Gaoling. In contrast to Aang's choice to protect the next generation from the disturbances of war, Toph willingly flees a childhood that had been deeply disturbed by her parents' overprotectiveness concerning any outside disturbances. Thus, for Toph, this change is overwhelmingly blissful, leaving in the distance the restrictive shaping of her upbringing that she would otherwise be enmeshed in for the rest of her life. Toph's issues with her parents' severe restrictions reappear the following day as the four set up camp. Reveling in her independence, Toph is paranoid at Katara's talk of working together, suspecting it is only an attempt to rationalize offering her unneeded help in the future. And so, the new family fractures. As a result of this, Toph runs into Zuko's uncle, who gives her the wisdom to understand the need for mutual recognition, for give and take among friends. So, safe return is played again when Toph reunites with the others, now understanding what friendship means, as they fall asleep too comfortably in each other's presence to truly appreciate their family's safe return to tranquility. However, just moments prior, Zuko had pushed the group away, despite their empathy and desire to help.
Zuko, I can help!
The resolution of Toph's fracture with the group is musically, and therefore thematically tied to the notion of Zuko as a future member, foreshadowing the crucial importance of Toph's meeting with Iroh as the means by which Zuko is eventually accepted.
Some people believe that the Avatar was never reborn into the air nomads and that the cycle is broken, but I haven't lost hope.
Katara expresses a childlike faith that the Avatar will return, so we return to the same empty mount from which Avatar Roku had vanished, the mount at the center of the world, around which everything was and will be balanced. What began as a distant legend of an epic past now ends as a story about a child's personal hope and plea for the future, that everything she valued from her childhood would be preserved and not lost to time, that what was now invisible would become visible, from unconditioned to conditioned. Unfortunately, when the Avatar does actually return, all Katara can see in Aang is a little kid. He is hardly the omnipotent parental figure in whom she had placed all her hope. So she displaces it once again from the visible boy onto his invisible future. So when Aang enters the Avatar state in Ba Sing Se's underground, Katara smiles joyously at his ascendance, believing that Aang was no longer the little kid that she knew, and that the Avatar that she hoped for had finally returned. But when Azula struck him down, her naive image of the Avatar finally collapsed. Even the Avatar, the ultimate parental figure of legend, was not the all-powerful protector she longed for, to replace the loss of her father to the war. Katara had tried to grow up and tried to be strong for as long as she could, knowing her father had left precisely because he cared about them and the world they grew up in. But with the Avatar's fall, she could no longer shake the feeling of being abandoned, nor her resentment at the world.
It's not brave, it's selfish and stupid. We could be helping him, and I know the world needs him, but doesn't he know how much that we need him too? How can he just leave us behind?
You're talking about me too, aren't you?
Even the Avatar, at the height of his powers, was only ever human. She had childishly not understood that if the Avatar would return to the world once again, he would be fragile and made of flesh. This left Katara with a pressing question. If he was not omnipotent, could what she valued from her childhood truly be restored? Would he really have the power to bring it back? It was on the same empty mount that her question was finally answered. It was there that Aang embodied Katara's hopes to restore balance to the world. All of his friends caught in the turmoil of their unbalanced world, including Katara, believed that the only way to bring it back was if Aang killed the Fire Lord.
Aang, we do understand. It's just...
Just what, Katara? What?
We're trying to help.
Then when you figure out a way for me to beat the Fire Lord without taking his life, I'd love to hear it!
Even his own past lives could only see the turmoil of their own times reflected back to them in his, and so advised Aang to do the same.
Here is my wisdom for you. Selfless duty calls you to sacrifice your own spiritual needs and do whatever it takes to protect the world.
Even the earth itself loudly demanded he do so, triggering the Avatar spirit so that his past lives would overwhelm him. Aang could no longer run away, and was now forced by the hands of the past to kill the Fire Lord. But Aang knew that such a choice would not define his spiritual journey alone. Enlightenment would be lost to the world. All it would hear from Oz's execution was that the language of force was the only language that could be spoken. The very axis of the world on which he stood would revolve around death, so he wouldn't do it. But this was not an act of foolish naivete, that everything could be held onto and no sacrifices would ever have to be made. A childish insistence on one's own way, and a refusal to become wise to the world, simply running away as he had as a 12-year-old boy. No, Aang detached himself from the strife in which the world was currently embroiled, and from the existential threat posed by the comet. For he was not brought up in just any place, but in the monastery. From this place of free-spirited detachment, he could confront the turmoil before him with greater clarity. For him, what was the point in remaining attached to a world where children could only grow up by becoming killers? So, Aang let go of Ozai, of himself, and risked being destroyed. Thus risked the world being destroyed, just for some small chance that the older one, frozen in his childhood memory, would not be. Katara had believed for so long that only omnipotent power could save her world. But exactly the opposite was needed. It was only by letting go and becoming vulnerable before the cynicism of false maturity that the world she valued could truly be restored. So, from the elevated place of wielding godlike power over Ozai, Aang descended, down, from the unconditioned to the conditioned, down to the human level, down to the world he remembered as a kid, when he was just a simple monk. Aang listened to the earth, but he had to listen closely, to hear the voices whispering beneath the surface, beneath all the clamor for Ozai's death. What was the world truly begging for? Hope. In its final use, safe return is drawn up into a larger harmony, just as the rebirth of family is finally drawn up into the rebirth of the wider world, when Zuko becomes one with them to end the war. Safe return is about friendship, and so does not require a climax to fulfill its purpose. But here, the familiar gentle notes bleeds into another song, first played when Katara and Aang were trapped in the darkness of the Cave of Two Lovers. There, the slow sensual plucking suggested the gentle building of desire between the two. Which was left unresolved. But now that their desires have been freely integrated within their friendship, and the musical theme integrated within Safe Return, the tension can now finally be released. We hear the resounding beats of a triumphant percussion, followed by a slowly rising harmony, finally ending on the theme associated with Aang's salvation of the world. Aang saved the world. He came of age and confronted the ills of their times directly for what they really were. But in doing so, he held on to the shape of his childhood and found a way to reshape the world and himself so that neither would be lost. Katara was now willing to form a romantic relationship, not just because Aang ended the war, but because of the way he ended it. For when the Avatar was an omnipotent parental figure, she couldn't love him as an equal. And when Aang was just a little boy, she couldn't love him as an equal. The way he achieved peace revealed to her that it was not the Avatar that she truly needed, nor was it the boy Aang who truly needed her. Only once she saw how he grew up into Avatar Aang could she love him as an equal. And in realizing this, Katara finally came of age. They grew up faster than they ever should have been expected to. That way, the children of the future wouldn't have to. Through Aang, Katara's fragmented tribe and fragmented family was and would be restored. And through Katara, Aang's Air tradition and family would survive. While they could never return to their homes the way they once were, the cultures of origin wouldn't be lost to the commotion of inevitable change. The old world wouldn't just die, but would instead be reborn. In a way, the Fire Lord is framed as right. The world had to be reborn from the ashes, and it was. Thankfully, this wasn't his. But, as Aang grew up, being told by the monks, and through his travels, confirmed for himself, the world was a very delicate place. Such as the home we grew up in. But perhaps, with the rebirth of the air nomads and their monastic order, through Katara and Aang's family, the people could be ready to leave its turmoil behind. Living in this world is necessary for humanity to grow and develop. But it's not sufficient. So what was on the tip of my tongue? What was Avatar about? Home. The ones we're born into. And the ones that we join.